glasses.
Will. I'll take you out.
That doesn't.
All right. Both sides are ready to go. Best of luck to both teams. Just toss up one. The mechanical balance equation over this quantity is actually an inequality. A Carnot cycle is a rectangle on a plot of it against temperature. Processes where this quantity changes don't obey time reversal symmetry. Yes?
Entropy?
Say it again?
Entropy?
Yes, 15. Bonus? Answer the following about the Grand Canyon for 10 points each. It was formed via this process in which weathered sediment is transported away by water, wind, or glaciers.
Erosion?
Limestone makes up the uppermost of these distinguishable layers of sedimentary rock in the canyon. The principle of superposition states the oldest of these layers will always lie at the bottom.
Strata?
The so-called Tonto group consists of schist and granite in the Vishnu basement rocks, the Tapete sandstone, and the Bright Angel layer, named for and composed of this rock. Natural gas is tapped from this rock in fracking.
Shale?
30. Toss up 2. One story by this author begins when a real-life friend of this author remembers the phrase, mirrors and copulation are abominable. This author imagined a novel in which each possible decision occurs, creating different paths that branch and reconverge. This author described an object in a mediocre poet's basement which allows observers to see every point in the universe. He wrote about books containing every possible permutation of 25 characters arranged on shelves in hexagonal rooms in another story. This author of the Ficciones wrote The 11, yes,
Warriors?
and the Library of Babel, 10 points your bonus. Answer the following about crazy antics by American governors for 10 points each. John Kitzhaber served as Democratic governor of this state for 12 years total before resigning in 2015 amid an ethics scandal involving his fiancée. Its current governor, Kate Brown, is openly bisexual.
Wyoming?
Oregon. This state's governor, who once compared the IRS to the Gestapo, vetoed 65 consecutive bills in June 2015. Bernie Sanders and a man from this non-Vermont state are the only independents in the Senate. Answer? No, Maine. This current Republican governor of New Jersey and presidential candidate lost pretty much all hope of becoming president just for closing a few lanes on a bridge for a week in September 2013. 10.
Rich Kid.
Toss up 3. A navy from this historical state sank 31 ships without losing a single vessel after recognizing that a current was alternating every 3 hours. This kingdom invented a cart which fired 200 fire arrows simultaneously at the enemy, as well as a double-decked ship called the Panoxion. Boats used by this historical state were armored with iron spikes and released smoke from the bow. Admiral Yi popularized these turtle ships. This nation's Joseon dynasty defeated Hideyoshi Toyotomi, but Japan occupied it from 1910 till 1940. Yes?
Korea?
10 bonus. The main contention of this school was that virtue is sufficient for happiness, which implies that all non-sages are essentially slaves. For 10 points each, name this school of philosophy which emphasized in living in harmony with nature. It suggested that only sages could be free from human emotions. Stoicism. The Stoics embraced the classical form of this idea that God is all-encompassing and is roughly equivalent with the entire universe. Baruch Spinoza famously embraced this idea too. Answer?
Pantheism?
I'll take it, yes, pantheism or word forms. Stoicism founder Zeno divided all of philosophy into physics, logic, and this topic, which was also the subject of a geometrical tract by Spinoza and a book by Aristotle titled for his son. This subject asks, what is moral?
Ethics?
20. Toss up 4. These creatures kill a woman who has turned into an invulnerable man by burying him under a fir tree. They are descendants of the first ever murderer and a cloud goddess. One of these creatures dies after he opens a store of magical wine, then accidentally pricks himself with an arrow. After nearly raping a woman, one of these creatures gives her his blood, promising it'll be a love potion. Peleus wooed Thetis with the help of one of these creatures. Their blood poisoned Heracles to death. Yes? 10 bonus. This albino character has red eyes, no eyebrows, no eyebrows, and hires Mr. McCawber because he cannot conceive that anybody is that incompetent in business. For 10 points each, being this character who blackmails Mr. Whitfield and tries to marry his daughter Agnes, but is stymied by Tommy Traddles. No, Uriah Heep. Agnes Whitfield ends up marrying this character after Doris Spinlow dies in childhood. This character introduces the novel, Whether I Should Turn Out to Be the Hero of My Own Life, These Pages Must Show. David Copperfield. David Copperfield is the most autobiographical novel by this author of Great Expectations and Oliver Twist. 10. Toss-up 5. A version of this sculpture depicting Nicodemus was destroyed by the artist, then given to Francesco Bandini. Jan de Villiers commissioned this sculpture for his funeral monument. The rocks of Golgotha form its base. Caravaggio imitated the sagging right arm in this sculpture in his entombment. An unnaturally tall and young woman in this sculpture wears an incredibly billowing dress. For fear of having this work stolen, its sculptor signed his name across a sash. This marble sculpture, which sits in St. Peter's Basilica, shows a woman cradling her... Yes? 10. The Spanish word hacienda is a rough derivative of this term. For 10 points each, mean these privately owned parcels of land in the Roman Republican Empire. These massive estates were worked by slaves in Roman Sicily. Answer? No, latifundia. Latifundia. Owners of latifundia greater than 600 acres in area were eligible to join this institution in the Roman Republic. This institution actually wielded power during the Republic, but it persisted well into the empire. Roman senators wore a toga with a stripe of this color. This color was popularly known as a symbol of royalty, especially in the Byzantine Empire. 20. Toss-up 6. This man's namesake identity is that the product of two sums of squares is itself a sum of... Yes?
Pythagoras.
Make 5. Is itself a sum of squares. Dijkstra's algorithm is often implemented using a heap named for this man. He introduced Arabic numerals to the West. The matrix 1, 1, 1, 0 gives this man's numbers when exponentiated and has the golden ratio as an eigenvalue. This man's numbers are formed by the shallow diagonals on Pascal's triangle. A classic example of recursion is his relation that a sub n plus 1 equals a sub n plus a sub n minus 1. That pattern models the growth rate of rabbits and starts 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. For 10 points. Yes? 10. Bonus. The maximum height of a projectile is proportional to this power of the sine of the launch angle theta. For 10 points each, name this value. For an object undergoing uniform linear acceleration from rest, displacement is proportional to this power of the time. Yes? The laws of kinematics are independent of this quantity for the object being accelerated. This quantity is measured in kilograms. In projectile motion, this quantity equals the initial velocity squared times the sine of 2 theta over little g. A description is acceptable. Answer? No, it's the range or how far it goes. So 20 points, and toss up 7. This character complains that Europeans being fascists or anarchists wouldn't change the fact that I don't own a car, in a scene where he forms his hair into a mohawk while showering. A secretary named Grace points out that all the sportos, motorheads, and geeks adore this character and think he's a righteous dude. He lip-syncs it. Yes? You were one word out of power. I'm sorry, you said 10 points. I saw you like trying to think of it. He lip-syncs to Dunkashane. Your bonus. Answer questions about journalists in film for 10 points each. In this 1941 Orson Welles classic, this title character is a newspaper magnate after starting in yellow journalism. This film's protagonist mysteriously mutters Rosebud at his death. This actor plays a journalist who falls in love with the estranged heiress Ellie Andrews in It Happened One Night. He played the Charleston gentleman Rhett Butler in Gone with the Wind. Answer? No answer. No answer. Clark Gable. In a 1962 film, Faisal claims this man is the hero that American reporter Jackson Bentley is seeking. This character's death in a motorcycle crash is shown at the start of the film. Answer?
No answers.
Great classic, Lawrence of Arabia. Lawrence of Arabia. So T.E. Lawrence. 10 points and toss up 8. One of this author's works begins by invoking the patron of true holiness, which foul error doth defeat. He dedicated a collection which includes the poem One Day I Wrote Her Name Upon the Strand to his future wife, Elizabeth Boyle. 8 lines of pentameter followed by an Alexandrine make up this poet's namesake stanza form. This author of Amoretti and Epithalamion created the villainous sorcerer Archimago and the heroic Red Cross Knight. This namesake of a sonnet form is best known for an allegorical epic poem about Gloriana, who represents Elizabeth I. For 10 points, name the 16th century author of the fairy, yes? Fairy Queen. 10, your bonus. When many of these features are present, small block islands called skerries form. For 10 points each, name these narrow inlets of water between tall cliffs, which are carved out by glaciers.
Fjord?
Fjords are especially common in this northernmost Scandinavian nation, which owns the archipelago of Svalbard, the northernmost settlement of the world with a permanent civilian population.
Norway?
Cliff divers jump off into the narrow, shallow, rocky channels of La Quebrada near this New World city. This resort beach city on the Pacific Ocean was part of an early galleon route to Manila in the Philippines. Answer?
Straight up Magellan.
I know, Acapulco. Acapulco. So 20 points, and toss up 9. A senator from this state coined the term mudsill of society and first brought the gag rule to the floor of the House. The Grimke sisters were born in this state. James Henry Hammond and diarist Mary Chestnut hailed from this state. A man from this state won the lottery and planned a revolt for Bastille Day in 1822. A congressman from this state beat up a rival with a cane in 1850. Yes? 10 bonus. In the country of the blind, the one-eyed man is the king. For 10 points each, that mantra is usually first attributed to this wit of the Northern Renaissance in his book Adagia. This humanist and author of A Handbook of a Christian Knight was less revolutionary than Reformation colleagues like Martin Luther. I know, Erasmus. The saying is quoted in this Portuguese author's novel Blindness. This Nobel Prize-winning author wrote The Stone Raft. Answer? Saramago, Jose Saramago. This British sci-fi pioneer borrowed the quotation for his long story, The Country of the Blind. He also wrote War of the Worlds and The Time Machine. 10 points. And toss up 10, last of the first half. John Frederick Maurice wrote an 1883 text pointing out how infrequently this action actually occurs. The October Resolution controversially obviated the need for this action. The clause which grants this power permits the issuance of letters of marque and reprisal. If this action is not done, a report must be filed to Congress and a 60 or 90-day timetable begins, according to a 1973 law vetoed by Richard Nixon. The Gulf of Tonkin Resolution permitted conventional activity even when this enumerated power is not used. Congress has used this power 11 times, none since 1942. For 10 points, name this power that formally establishes a military action. Yes?
Affirmative action?
No penalty. Yes?
Third power.
That's when you declare war. You officially declare war. So that is the half. We're going to score check.
They have 150, they have 85.
We have 150 to 85. Do we agree?
Was question 1, was that not power?
Question 1 was entropy, which was power.
It wasn't.
That question 1 was power.
So I would make it 45, then neg on number 6, because I've got 90.
Yeah,
That would make it 90, yes.
Okay. I thought you said 90.
What did I have?
Okay, so 90 to 150.
Okay.
All right. Coaches, would you like a moment, or shall we press on?
Isaac, no.
Guys, wake up, please. Hands on the buzzer. Concentrate on every question. You all right, Chris?
Gray's real cool.
It's a wait on his hands.
Excellent.
In case you're curious how the rest of that was going to go. He lip syncs to Donkey Shane and Twist and Shout after crashing freight in Chicago. This character spends an afternoon hiding from Mr. Rooney with his girlfriend Sloan and his friend Cameron for
Great question.
his high
Our
school.
blue team lost to the Pawn
I
City 500.
was taking it when he said the socials, I was like, oh, this is
At least
gonna
the
be
game's in
really
Pawn City.
good.
Might be wrong there. Oh.
Shalena, S-A-J.
It can't be, it
We just
can't
need
be
to have
where
stats.
they're on the record,
So they did it too.
or A.
Alright. I think I heard you say Clark Gable, but it was after I called time, so. Couldn't take it.
And she kind of said it's been made.
Yeah.
Same.
Confident.
Alright. Both sides ready for the second half?
Not ugly.
Alright. Once again, best of luck to both teams. Here is toss-up 11. Virchow or Virchow's triad must be satisfied for these objects to form. Mutations in factors 5 through 11 lead to their overproduction. TPA is administered to break down these structures, which require tissue factor to form. They are composed of fibrin. Heparin and warfarin, which block the activity of vitamin K, are administered to prevent formation of these objects. One of these structures forms in an ischemic stroke, blocking blood supply. Yes?
Clot.
That is 10. Bonus? Blood clot. Answer the following about decolonization in Africa after World War II, for 10 points each. Independence movements in the post-war period were largely driven by this principle espoused by the Atlantic Charter. It argues that a nation has the sole right to choose its international status without any foreign meddling.
Localism.
Answer?
Localism.
No, it's self-determination. This nation was one of the first to decolonize, gaining its independence from Britain in 1957 under the leadership of Kwame Nkrumah. Kofi Annan was born in this country. Answer?
Chad.
No, Ghana. The actual first kingdom to get its independence after World War II was this nation, which was led by Idris I until a coup by Muammar Gaddafi in 1969.
Syria.
Libya. So no points on the bonus, and toss up 12. The trials of the 16 and 21 accused the members of this leader's party of breaking Article 58. This man's idiotic agricultural advisor ignored Mendelian genetics and claimed that fertilization was inheritable. An advisor to this leader coined the term socialism in one country. One of his advisors proposed a massacre in the cotton forest. A secret speech about this man's personality cult drove his advisors toward rehabilitation. An old rival to this leader was murdered by Raymond Mercader in Mexico City. NKVD leader Nikolai Yezhovly led the great purges of this man's cabinet. For 10 points, being the Soviet leader who exiled Leon Trotsky. Yes?
Oh, I'm sorry.
10. Bonus? This compound's K sub A is almost exactly the same as ammonia's K sub B, which is a complete coincidence. For 10 points each, name this weak 2-carbon acid, which is often sold in a very high purity glacial form.
Carbonic acid.
Acetic acid. Aqueous acetic acid will have a pH less than this number. This number corresponds to a neutral pH.
7.
Yes. Acetic acid is a common solvent in this laboratory technique, which purifies a solvent by dissolving it in a hot solvent and then cooling it down and leaving impurities in the solution. It forms ordered products, unlike precipitation.
Distillation.
Say again?
Distillation.
No, it's crystallization. Crystallization. So 10 points, and toss up 13. This artist painted a woman whose dress shrouds a globe as she stares at a ball suspended from the ceiling. A painting by this artist depicts a model holding a trumpet and a book, with head topped by a vividly bright blue laurel, and probably symbolizes the muse Cleo. He unusually used pointillism to show 6 tiny people in front of a harbor in a highly realistic cityscape. This artist created allegories for faith and for painting. A woman wears an oriental yellow and blue turban in a painting by this artist. Yes?
Vermeer.
10 bonus. That's the view of Delft and Girl with the Pearl Ring. This era began when a god who was supposed to sacrifice himself chickened out, allowing Nanwatl to jump in the fire instead. For 10 points each, name this current age, which will end in earthquakes when the moon devours the sun.
Third age.
The 5th age. The last 4 ages have been brought down by feuds between these 2 rival Aztec gods. One of them lost his foot when the world was being created. The other one exiled himself after sleeping with a virgin. I need both. Answer? No answer. It's Tezcatlipoca and Quetzalcoatl. The First Age came to an end after Quetzalcoatl sent these big predators down to Earth. It's their bonus. The Olmecs often sculpted these large cats as the Central American analog to the werewolf.
Leopards.
No, it's a jaguar. So no points. And toss up 14. This action is called dana in Hinduism. This action is mandatory for Muslims at the very end of Ramadan and occurs right before the Eid al-Fitr prayers. Maimonides described the 8 forms of this practice organized by merit. It's not love, but first, yes?
Charity.
15. Answer the following about early modern universities in Europe for 10 points each. The concept of the European university was greatly influenced from these schools of higher education in the Islamic world, where they were often linked to mosques and taught Islamic theology. Answer? Madrasas. The earliest European university still in operation is in this Italian city, where women enjoyed comparatively more freedom than any other Renaissance city. It outlawed slavery with its early Paradise Law.
Venice.
I know it's Bologna. This Western European city was home to another very early university, now known as the Sorbonne. This city was the largest in the West for most of the Middle Ages.
London.
I know it's in Paris. So no points. And toss up 15. A character immediately steals a donut after he is given a choice apple for performing this action. A character performs this action after getting dirty in a fistfight with Alfred Temple, but longs to visit Cardiff Hill instead. In Chapter 2, Jim is beaten with a slipper for doing this action in exchange for seeing a sore toe. Ben Rogers admits this activity is better than swimming, then offers an apple in order to do it. The protagonist explains that even Sid isn't up to this task, since Aunt Polly only trusts him. Yes?
Painting the fence.
Yeah, I can take that. Tom Sawyer painting the fence, whitewashing the fence. 10 points, your bonus. Answer the following about classical composer Muzio Clementi, the father of the pianoforte, for 10 points each. In 1781, Clementi engaged in a piano contest with this young Austrian prodigy, who later borrowed a passage from one of Clementi's piano sonatas for the overture to his opera, The Magic Flute. Clementi's teaching skills made an early impression on Carl Czerny, the teacher of this piano virtuoso of the 19th century. This man wrote the tone poem Les Preludes. Answer? Say it again?
List.
Clementi is said to have taken over the field of piano pedagogy, where Domenico of this musical family had left off after writing over 550 piano sonatas. Alessandro was the patriarch of this Italian compositional dynasty.
Botticelli.
Scarlatti. So 20 points, and toss up 16. Atoms with the largest value for this quantity have the highest priority in stereochemistry. Slater's rule subtract a shielding constant from this value. The Rydberg equation sets ionization energy proportional to it squared over n squared. An increase in the effective form of this quantity decreases the atomic radius within a single period. This quantity increases by 1 in beta minus decay, but decrease, yes?
Atomic number.
That is 10, your bonus. Answer the following about effective techniques in rhetoric for 10 points each. This especially common technique uses a series of similar consonant sounds at the beginning of consecutive words.
Alliteration.
George Orwell hated this rhetorical device, an understatement which uses double negatives to change the emphasis of the sentence. These constructions aren't always completely ineffective, though.
Hyperbole.
No, litotes. Litotes are often employed as part of this mode of persuasion in which the speaker appeals to the audience's character or makes an appeal to authority. I need the Greek name.
Pathos.
Ethos. Yep. So that was 10 points, and toss up 17. A composer from this country wrote an E-flat major evocation followed by movements named for this country's cities. A Distant Dance is the second movement of a piano work depicting nights in the gardens of this country. In a ballet analogizing love as a magician, a composer from this country included a ritual fire dance. That composer from here also wrote The Three-Cornered Hat. Miles Davis included a jazz setting of a Joaquin Rodrigo concerto in an album titled Sketches of This Country. For 10 points, name this European country the home of the tenors, Placido Domingo and Jose Carreras. Yes? 10. Bonus. Cutin and cutan, which are not the same thing, are both examples of these compounds. For 10 points each, name this class of lipids, which are esters of long-chain fatty acids with long-chain alcohols. In plants, they cover the cuticle to prevent water loss. And, yes. Cuticles appear in this phase of the life cycle of angiosperms. This diploid stage is dominant in angiosperms, but is smaller than the gametophyte in mosses.
Spratling.
I know it's a sporophyte. Specifically, the cuticle covers these plant structures, which hold small openings called stoma to allow for gas exchange. Most photosynthesis occurs in these green plant structures. 20. Toss up 18. 7 consecutive sentences in this book begin with the phrase, "Never shall I forget," followed by the single word, never. A character in this book recounts that soup tasted like corpses after declaring, "God is here, hanging from this gallows." It ends with the narrator looking into a mirror and seeing a corpse staring back. This book, originally published as "And the World Remains Silent," won its author the 1986 Nobel Peace Prize. This book's narrator doesn't respond to his father's dysentery-rattled summons at Buchenwald. This first, yes?
9.
10, bonus. The Yippies nominated the pig named Pegasus for president in this year. For 10 points each, name this year in which Abby Hoffman, Bobby Seale, and 6 others were arrested at the tumultuous, riot-inducing Democratic National Convention.
1986.
Turn it around, 1968. The 1968 DNC took place in this city, where Gestapo tactics were used in the streets by Mayor Richard Daley's men. Al Capone operated in this city.
Chicago.
During the riots, protesters began shouting this 5-word phrase while police officers brutally attacked demonstrators. This phrase likely originates from a Bob Dylan song. Answer?
The world is changing.
The whole world is watching. So 10 points. And toss up 19. Let's get a score check before 19.
We got 230, 165.
So 165, 230. Toss up 19. A woman who held this office invited the men who murdered her brother to a banquet, then flooded the banquet hall. The great royal wife married the holder of this office. A woman who held this office was born in a lion's den, built the Chapelle Rouge, and led a campaign to Punt for frankincense and myrrh. The co-regency stela suggests a woman, not Smenkare, achieved this office during the Amarna succession. Another woman to hold this office killed herself with an asp after the Battle of Actium. For 10 points, yes,
Pharaoh.
10 bonus. That was Cleopatra. And your bonus. The artist of this painting created a lozenge follow-up to it titled For Victory, which is oriented 45 degrees relative to the normal. For 10 points each, name this painting, which uses colored masking tape and many squares and rectangles to represent traffic. Answer?
Red, yellow, blue.
Broadway Boogie Woogie. P.A. Mondrian's Broadway Boogie Woogie appears appropriately now hangs in this New York Art Museum, which is mostly dedicated to 20th century art, unlike the Metropolitan Museum of Art.
Museum of Modern Art.
Yeah, one moment. The painting Broadway Boogie Woogie has a white background and uses these 3 other colors extensively. Mondrian did many compositions named for these 3 colors, which also use the white and black.
Red, yellow, blue.
Yeah. So 20 points. And toss up 20. This law introduced the House, H-O-U-S-S-E, criteria. Lamar Alexander and Patty Murray sponsored a bipartisan bill in 2015 to amend this law without allowing for portability. This law was written by John Boehner in the House and Ted Kennedy in the Senate. This incarnation of the ESEA program introduced 3 criteria for people to be labeled as highly qualified. 32 states requested a waiver after failing to meet this law's standards by 2012. This law requires any institution receiving Title I funds must meet annual yearly progress. For 10 points, name this 2001 education law that mandate, yes?
No Child Left Behind.
10 points. I think both your coaches could have probably first line to that one. Your bonus. Characters killed in this novel include Uncle Pio and the Marchesa de Montemayor. For 10 points each, name this 5-part novel in which Brother Juniper witnesses a catastrophe at the tidal structure in Lima, Peru. It won the 1928 Pulitzer Prize.
Machu Picchu.
No, it's the Bridge of San Luis Rey. which was written by this author, who wrote about the Antrobus family surviving 3 disasters, including an ice age and the skin of our teeth. Answer?
Marquez.
Thornton Wilder, who also wrote this play set in Grover's Corners, New Hampshire. In this play, the stage manager breaks the fourth wall to narrate to the audience about the Gibbs and Webb families.
Our town.
10. And so we have a final score,
We've got, two ten or 215 to 230.
215, 230. Thank you guys, excellent game. Please head down to 118 for the refreshment. Best of luck in your afternoon matches.
Again.